This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it, man, I know it, I know.
What did you think about the Daniel versus Phil Hellmuth situation?
I heard it's a go. I think Phil greenlit.
Yeah, they're gonna play on High Stakes Feud.
Yeah,
so that'll be the next challenge. As you see the Real Kid Poker tweet here, he said he'll play you, big guy, and wherever.
Phil's gonna recoup a lot of that EV simply by putting Daniel in very difficult spots where, like, when pots are small, it's not really going to matter anymore. So, like, redlining in small pots isn't that big of a deal. And when pots are extremely big, Phil just has it, right? Because, like, he's so linear in nature. He just never is at bottom, right? And I'm not saying that makes Phil a favorite by any stretch. I definitely don't think that's true. If we're betting no odds, I take Daniel 100% of the time, without question.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you're going to lay me 4-1, I'll take Hellmuth every single fucking time.
Yeah. Even like 3-1. Like, it's just like Hellmuth is.
I just don't think
he's gonna do fine. Right?
I just think in that format, it's really difficult to be that big of a favorite.
Have you watched a little bit of the High Stakes Poker stuff or no?
Yeah, I saw the most recent episode.
The one where he folded Ace King.
Yeah.
I mean,
genius.
I was having this discussion with some friends, and I was like, it's always about Lynn. Like, I don't know why. It's always about Lynn. They were like, would you take Lynn or Phil Hellmuth? And I was like, Lynn, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like, this guy's folding Ace King to Dwan's. Right. What are you talking about?
Hellmuth's floor and ceiling are maybe like 1 or 2 big blinds per 100 difference, right? Like, his floor may be that he's like literally winning 0, and his ceiling might be like 2 big blinds per 100.
Yeah, it's like, what are you talking about? This guy's never he's at the mercy of making nuts.
But the thing is, you can't lose much that way. So, like, his floor is actually relatively high, but his ceiling is so goddamn low that it doesn't compensate.
And then he just folds. He like talks to him. He's like talking to him like, oh, you got something? You just want to give it to me? And then like Lazaro says something back to him, which he read as strong, and he just mucks the hand.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. And he just, and then a king flops. And I'm sad that they didn't fucking zoom in on his face. But this is the type of play. Okay, this is the reason why people say Phil Hellmuth sucks. It's not that, they hate him or whatever, but this doesn't make any sense.
It does, though.
0 sense.
It does, though. Like, from a live perspective, I understand where he's coming from. There are just spots where, like, people are just way too tight and don't possess bluffs, right? And, like, Laz just isn't bluffing there ever. So
he's not.
Hellmuth was in a best case scenario. He was in a best case scenario where he was chopping with Laz, and he still has Dur to contend with. I'm not justifying the fold. Obviously, he's just 3-bet Dur to begin with. But, like, when your main emphasis in your strategy is to play conservative to a fault, to play conservative in a way where he's never, ever trying to maximize value with less than the nuts, right? Never. Literally, it is of no interest to Hellmuth. And because he's never trying to maximize value with less than the nuts, he doesn't have to worry about incorporating bluffs or bottom of range to help those stronger hands perform, right? He just lets them perform to their raw equity and lets people make mistakes versus his range over and over and over again because they either aren't disciplined enough to fold bluff catchers versus a range that is completely bounded and devoid of bluffs, or because he's just never putting in a ton of money unless he's on the right side of coolers. Set over sets, trip over trips, straight over straight, flush over flush, right? He just plays everything that's non-nutted conservative enough to the point where, like, he loses when he's against better hands, or he wiggles his way out, right? Like, he lets a board 4 flush whenever he has a straight, or he, whatever. Like, he lets himself get bluffed in a bunch of spots where it's very clear to anybody who's competent at this game that he just needs to be calling with more hands in these situations. Otherwise, he's being exploited. He builds a strategy around the exploitability of being conservative. But What he gains through all of that is a tremendous reduction of risk. Fact of the matter is, the more evolved poker becomes, the greater the risk factor every time you enter a pot, right? Because the more the skill gap's closed, the closer to 50-50 any one interaction is, right? So
you become indifferent. A lot of things become indifferent.
Right. We're fighting for micro edges, right? We're fighting for a 1%, 3%, 4% skill edge that's incredibly small and requires a fuck ton of capital to invest in order to get marginal returns, right? You may have to risk 5 or 10 million to see a few $100,000 in return, right? You may have to risk 5 or 10 million to make a $500,000 a year in bets, right? So Hellmuth recognizes this. He recognizes he's not comfortable risking 5 or 10 million to make a $500,000. And instead, he would much prefer to just put himself in a scenario where maybe he's only risking like 1 or 2 million to make 2 or 300,000, but it's relatively secure because people are still bad enough to make errors against him. If everybody just understood the way that he's exploitable and just never gave the guy action, he'd be out of poker, or he would strictly play tournaments, right? But he plays soft Silicon Valley games where they want to say they beat Hellmuth in a pot. He's not Kessler. He doesn't try to navigate these fields by just like literally folding his way to the top. He gets in the mix. He just gets in the mix very passively and conservatively. You know, he calls a lot of raises. He traps. He limps a lot from spots. And, you know, he forces people to put in money actively against him when he's at the top of his range. Yeah. And that's just going to win if nobody's willing to adjust. And the thing is, nobody wants to adjust.
It's one of those things that really, really, people should just fold rivers to him, like, unconditionally, unless they have, like
even just like earlier,
a 5-card hand.
Yeah, just like earlier in hands. Like if you're estimating that in a normal spot, your hand has like 40% equity against range, well, you have to say like what equity does it have against Hellmuth's range, you know? So it's like if you have 2 overs and a flush draw that aren't drawing to the nuts, and you're facing a bet from Hellmuth who you think is only betting like 2-pair plus and nut flush draws, suddenly your 50% equity hand goes down to like 20. And it's just like, this is an insane fold, but like that's what I'm supposed to do, versus a guy who literally has constructed a strategy around the fact that we are all too stupid to stop paying him off.